Hi everyone, and welcome to week 5, our final week of Training Tuesday. We're going to begin fully at the top of the hour, but we're just recapping on what happened, 2 weeks ago. Carolyn,
Yeah.
how do you remember back that far?
Well, you know me and AHT and metrics, I talk about them in my sleep. I adore it.
So there was a lot of pros and cons about AHT. What would you say,
You
both
see,
sides?
yeah, it's just got to be used correctly with AHT. I can talk for days on why AHT is not the bad guy, in my opinion. It has to be used correctly and in conjunction with other metrics, and it depends on your organisation and what you're trying to achieve. I've just been working with a group of managers who are saying, their target for their business is 450 seconds. They've got examples of some advisors who are double that, who need to come down, and they've got some examples of some who are maybe 30 seconds over that, who are hitting quality perfectly in every other way. They're having great rapport with the caller, and there's very little space within their personality to shave that extra 30 seconds or whatever off. So they're having to leave them at that and to accept that they'll be over target, but it's still okay because they're also doing some sales converting on the call. So if they're booking the jobs and they're getting the business and they're causing customers to go away feeling satisfied and happy, that's the right AHT for that person. And I fully support that. I think you've got to look at it quite in a sophisticated way, and look at different AHT for different call types, and take into account things like people's styles and personalities, because you could have somebody who's rushing through it and causing repeat call volume, but they're hitting target. So you've got to have other metrics that sit alongside it for it to work. But I think it's so powerful for identifying areas for improvement, for really focusing coaching conversations, and for spotting where somebody might need training or where there's some opportunities for efficiency. What you don't want is customers on hold for long periods of time, because nobody's really monitoring AHT, and it takes as long as it takes, and I'm having a happy chat with you about the weather when there's calls in the queue. So yeah, it needs to be used in context, really.
Yeah, you mentioned other metrics. What other ones were we covering the other week?
Oh, we did loads, didn't we? So sort of the rise of customer effort score, or net easy score. That's a huge topic at the moment, and I like that one. But again, used in conjunction with other things. But it's got to be, I think, in this day and age where customers have got so much choice, it's got to be as easy to do business with you as possible. Customers don't want to have to do all the chasing and the legwork. Nobody's got time for that anymore. It's just frustrating. And I think there's a lot of stuff that supports net easy. So your omni-channel, multi-channel strategy is really important for kind of making sure that it's all joined up. So if I tweet and say, I haven't heard back, you said you were going to call me back yesterday and no one's called me, I should be able to tweet you, and you should be able to then resolve that without me having to then get another tweet back that says, okay, can you email this address and we'll follow that up for you. Well, no, why should I? And so when it comes to then me completing a questionnaire on how easy it is to work with you, and it's not. So I think that's a good metric for identifying where we might be leaking and losing customers, and losing kind of customer satisfaction.
Yeah, no, Caroline said our issue with CSAT is that often the negative comments refer to the service issue rather than the service from the specific agent. What would you suggest in that sort of sense?
And that happens quite a lot. So we obviously, Real Results, do training for advisors, but there's no point companies investing in making their advisors speak more sweetly and efficiently and pleasantly to people if at the end of the day the field technicians, the service chain, is all broken and rude and falling down, because it's not the issue of the call centre and it's outside of their control. So that's where we have to look at the join up with the rest of the operation, and that the call centre is listened to when it's providing reports and feedback to the other directors around that board table who have that operational responsibility. And I think when you've got metrics that you can report on like that, and that you can provide anecdotal evidence of what's going wrong in the service chain via the call centre, that's really powerful. And that for me is why, you know, I love call centres, because they should be the beating heart of the business, where we're gathering all this insight that helps, you know, deliver a fantastic operation end to end.
Yeah.
It's a touch point, isn't it?
I know that Jamie said we're looking to introduce QFS using self-assessment, having agents listen to calls themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good, and I know Alistair did an assignment for this on self-assessment, and has got some great results from that. So I think that's something that a lot of people can take kind of away and use, is the ability to do self-assessment. And it doesn't always have to be on the entire call. So I know lots of managers will say time-wise it's difficult to do coaching and feedback. So I would say, okay, if you've listened to a call and maybe in the first 30 seconds the customer said to me, I have to change my booking because I've got a hospital appointment, as an advisor I might just go, oh, okay, let me do that for you now. And again, the customer mentions, you know, I'm really sorry, you know, I've had to be in hospital. All right, yeah, okay, we'll just change that for you now. And there's no, I'm really sorry to hear that, or I hope you're okay now. There's no empathy. And twice the customer's kind of knocked on that door of rapport and said, acknowledge, please, that I've been ill. You know, that's what they're looking for, and it's not happening. So if I, as your manager, just send you that 30 seconds and say, just listen to that and tell me what you think, that self-assessment then of me being able to listen to that back and go, oh yeah, I missed that trick. It doesn't take any time at all. We don't have to book a room and sit down and listen to the whole 6-minute call and analyse the whole thing. It was just that little tweak at the beginning that perhaps was needed, and the person is perfectly capable of identifying that themselves. So I think self-assessment is a massive win for contact centres that are busy and resource stretched. But it's also massive for morale and ownership, because I'm not then being told off as the advisor that I didn't do something, and I'm not getting so defensive about it because actually I've identified it myself. So I think that's really important.
Well, we've reached the top of the hour, so hello everyone and welcome to today's, final Training Tuesday. Just a bit of housekeeping. The presentation slides, as always, are to download at the top right hand corner. They will be sent to you afterwards along with the recording of everything today. Just to warn everyone, we will be referring to your assignments. If you prefer us not to talk about them or anything, please just let us know, and we won't mention them. There is a possibility we'd love to be able to use some of your the details and everything that you've discovered, so we'll probably be in touch at a later date and find out if you're happy for us to use your outcomes, obviously removing names and companies and things like that. So Carolyn, what are we discussing today?
Well, today is about having some space to review everything that we've covered so far and to reflect on it. And the assignments were a tool to facilitate that process as well. And of the 8 assignments that I've read, I've been absolutely blown away by the application of it. And it's just brilliant to see the impact that sometimes even simple tweaks and exercises and approaches can have. So I think that's a fantastic big thumbs up for everyone who's taken the time to actually sit back and apply this stuff and then write that up and send it in. So we will be sorting out some certificates for that. So it's about this time us really thinking overall what's coming out of this and sharing that with one another as well. So yeah, we might mention some of the things that you've covered in your assignments, but also as we're going through, for you to keep putting into the chat room the kind of light bulbs that are happening for you as you continue with this process. And it's also this week about helping you to get the most from what we've covered, because like any learning and training course, which this is, it's quite common to kind of be quite enthused at the end of it, but then, you know, kind of as we don't meet up going forward on Tuesdays, we can kind of slip back into business as usual. So it's giving you some kind of heads up thinking about how you might keep the momentum when you don't have to log in at this time every week. So it's a review and implementation support session today. So it's less in terms of kind of new content that I'm going to be talking about necessarily, but more about let's go back and revisit some of the key things. Let's think about what you've already put into place and what else you can do. Because for your assignment, we asked you to think about one thing from the overall programme that you've taken away and implemented, but it doesn't have to stop there. So, you know, hopefully you will find lots of things that you can go away and implement week after week after week going forward. So the purpose of this particular session is to focus on how you're going to get the most from your investment. You've spent time and money attending this course, so it's about making sure you leverage that to the maximum and making sure that actually you might be prepared for some of the barriers that can stop you being successful with that if you're not ready for them. To share, like we said, perhaps some of the content of what each other has been doing. If people don't mind us doing that, it can be really helpful because you can then think, oh, that's a really good idea. How else could I do that? So if there's anyone who's sort of saying opt out of talking about my assignment, then just let me know, Rachel. But then as we now go forward, we want to be thinking about what the next steps in your personal development journey. You know, we've sent links out every week for reading resources. Have you had the time to do that? What other things might you feel that are the gaps in your knowledge or performance going forward, and how might we be able to help you with that? Because there's just an absolute wealth of information on the call centre helper site, and there's stuff on the Real Results site as well. So people are very welcome to go and download and access stuff from there. So the first thing I'm going to kind of talk about is something that we cover a lot when we do train the trainer programs, to let people understand when adults learn the process of that and how that works, is that on average 15% of them go away from an intervention like this and they apply what they've learned successfully. So that's great. But 70%, which is the bulk of people, go away, they try something once and it fails for whatever reason. It might be that the timing isn't quite right, or we don't have the right resources or technology or time, you know, whatever it is. And so we try it once, it doesn't work, and we don't go back and do it again. And that's what we call the transfer of learning problem. So what we really want to do in order to get results from a program like this is to focus on why might it fail and how might I mitigate for that failure and keep trying. And the other 15% is about people who never even try to implement what they've learned. So quite often those people go on training courses and expect that by some kind of process of fairy dust or something, that just means it's going to happen just because you've been on the training course. And that's definitely not the case. It's about you mentally processing what you've learned and then actually using it to change either your behaviour, your style, your approach, or to put something into place that wasn't there before. So it's really important that we have a very clear strategy going from this session, and the assignment, like I say, is one way of doing that, but I would like people to continue to almost think about writing more of those assignments going forward as a strategy for carrying through your own implementation. And I know where we've got a few people from the same organisation, you could leverage that as almost what we call an action learning set, which is if the three of you were to continue to meet for an hour every Tuesday and talk about what you've done with it in the previous week, you know, even if you just meet for a short amount of time, that could be really helpful in just getting into that rhythm of continuing to implement and to also anticipate what might be some of those blockers and how you might overcome them, and almost doing some peer-to-peer coaching. So that's nice. If you don't have colleagues like that, then absolutely, you know, you can continue to email me or ask me any questions as you like. And I know that Call Centre Helper has a LinkedIn group. I think you're going to share, Rachel, as well.
Yeah.
And the chat room, the forum online.
Yeah, I mean, we've got over 19,000 people in our LinkedIn group, so it's a great, if you did have any questions, obviously that's a great that's call center managers and beyond. So yeah, I'll send that out to everyone as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really key part of it, is not feeling like you're on your own as well. So rather than trying to sit there and rack your brains and reinvent the wheel from scratch, it's about how you might just ask a question in a resource like that and get some suggestions, which may not be perfect, but might just stimulate the ideas and the thinking that you need to get over the barrier or blocker that you're facing. And I think then how you can adapt stuff back to your own organisation is really key. And we saw that in Caroline's assignment that I was mentioning about the advisor types and how she's changed the names to vegetables to kind of match the HelloFresh products, which that's a really great way of kind of getting something and then bringing it in and customizing it to fit your own organisation in a way that's more memorable and themed and people can get it better. It works for you. So I love that. It's really good.
That's my favourite one as well.
Okay, so thinking about how to get the most from it, there's kind of just some key things that I would say are important for us to make sure that we do. The first one is that we revise content. So this is like, if ever you've done any qualifications, you'll know that you might do work for a term, and then at the end of the term there's an exam, and that means that you go back and you look at what you covered across that length of time. So there's a reason why we've done this program modular in the structure that we have, and you've got booklets and slide decks for each one, you've got the recording for each one, and just because you've been through it once doesn't mean that's it, it's all gone in your brain. We know that as adults we don't retain everything straight away, so the more you can go back and re-listen or revisit what your notes were, the more that will stick. And when you have a particular challenge as well, you might be more motivated to go, oh, was there anything we covered in Training Tuesdays about that? And you might go back to it then, and that's fine too. But if you can start to think about building in some personal development time, so continuing with an hour a week for yourself going forward, and say that's going to be my time every week to either go and look on the website, read some articles, kind of go back through my materials or read some other books, then that is just continuing with that theme, which is really, really key. And the next one is about how you use the stuff. So it's all right to have it in your head, but if you don't actually contextualize it and use it and apply it, then it can become just too theoretical, and you know what to do, but you don't actually do it. So that's usually like me every January when I say I'm going to not drink wine for the entire month of January, or anyone who says I know that to lose weight I have to eat less and move more, and I know what to do, but that doesn't mean that when the chocolate cake's in front of me I'm necessarily going to use that knowledge. So it's about making sure you're quite disciplined and say this is how I'm going to use it. I'm going to try this with this person. I'm going to do this on this date. And I see this quite a lot in training courses that we run, in that people will book out the time to come to the training course, but then when I say, have you scheduled time in your diary to do what we've learned and covered in the course, the answer is no. And if you haven't booked out that time to do it, it just becomes very difficult. It doesn't happen just by magic. So I would very much say keep booking an hour every Tuesday for as long as you can, and make that your kind of revision and application thinking time, so that you're putting it into practice. And then you can also use that slot to do some review. So just because you've learnt it and you've used it, it still doesn't mean it will be perfect. So it's about then, once you've done that, do you take some time to step back again and think, how could I make that even better? Did that go the way I thought it was going to go? Is there anything that I would do differently? What can I learn from that? What was positive about it? And that I almost can continue with this almost assignment writing, journalistic kind of theme to review what happened. And I find writing stuff out like that really helps me to process or think about whether there's someone you can talk to. If you're extroverted, you might like to talk it through with a mentor or your own coach internally in your organisation. But really to kind of just step back and not just accept it as, yeah, I did it and that was all right, but to actually think, how could I make that even better going forward? Because it's always like great sports people, you know, they don't just go, yeah, I'm, you know, kind of top of my game, I'm Roger Federer, I'm brilliant at tennis, you know, I never have to practice or train ever again. You know, you still need to review and you still need to practice, so that's important. And so on that theme, I've mentioned about making time, so how you do that in your diary specifically is really a key factor in getting the results out of this programme and overcoming the typical barriers of transfer of learning. And everything that I'm talking about here is not just limited to Training Tuesday implementation. It's any training that you have going forward, or any training that your staff have going forward. So if they've been on some training to learn some new process, they will still need revision time, time to apply it, time to review it afterwards. And I think sometimes we can underestimate that and just expect it, right, you've been on the training, that's it, you know how to do that now. But it's an ongoing process. And when there isn't this weekly structure with us to follow this through each time, you have to be quite disciplined to think about how you can be self-sustaining doing that going forward. So I would definitely encourage you to kind of have a strategy for that in place. So that's all I'm going to talk about in terms of transfer of learning, barriers, ways in which that you can implement to make sure that you get full return on investment from what you've done. But if there's any questions on any of that, I'm happy to take them, or any reflections, tips for each other, thoughts on that so far.
Fab. Nothing at the moment. But what would you suggest for, say, making time? Would you say book out, a slot for yourself on, say, a Wednesday afternoon, or, know, every week, or is it just, right, okay, head down?
Yeah, and I think, you can work with your call volume, so look at, when is a quieter time. I would usually make myself less visible, because if you're still sat at your desk, then you're fair game as far as your colleagues are concerned usually. And you probably wouldn't think anything of taking yourself off for a meeting for an hour. So your personal development time really shouldn't be any different to that. Some of my clients have a learning hub within the contact centre, which is kind of a dedicated area where they've got iPads and bar stools, and it's encouraged that people take some time out every week to go and kind of sit in that area and do some revision and do some exploration and do some thinking. That's quite a nice environment. But if there isn't that, then literally, can you book a meeting room, or can you go and sit in your car and listen to a podcast or a webinar, or how are you going to continue your theme of personal development? And it doesn't just need to be kind of finger in the wind, what's the weekly webinar from Call Centre Helper, although it can be, but it should be more specific, like where are the gaps in my knowledge and my experience relevant to what I need in order to do my job well, and where can I find that information? So you're kind of creating a map for yourself, kind of a training plan, 6 weeks, 3 months at a time, and reviewing that. And if you've got a coach or a mentor, or you've got some self-awareness, 360 feedback or something like that, then that feeds into that process as well. So a bit more objectively what it might be that you want to work on. And hopefully from this programme you've probably found things that you kind of go, oh yeah, I'm good at that, or wow, that's new, I didn't know that even existed, or I feel like I don't know what to do with some of that kind of operational stuff or the coaching stuff. So you choose which are the things that feel like your weakest links, and then go and drill down into that in your weekly hour. But I think be disciplined about it and protect it. I think it can be the first thing that we sacrifice and go, well, no one's holding me to account for that, so I'll just work through it, or just not bother, I've got emails to send or whatever. but that's not going to get you kind of where you want to be if you want to continue progressing.
I'm going to promote our webinars anyway and say it is a good way of spending an hour. We've got a good one this week on employee engagement. So
lovely.
there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, and they will be, you know, always good stuff, but there is kind of thinking, yeah, what are the things that are my pressing challenges as well? And they can go and listen to the, you know, through the catalogue, can't they? Back catalogue of webinars. Doesn't have to be the live one every week. You know, go and find the ones that are in the library that are relevant as well.
Yeah.
So the next thing I've done is kind of picked out what might be just some of the highlights, I guess, one slide from each week that we've covered. And I did this before I got the assignments through, so it's quite interesting that actually there's quite a lot of similarities between what I picked as maybe some of the key messages from each week versus what kind of the team have picked and applied. So that's quite reassuring to see that that fits. So the use of advisor types and categories, quite a few people have written assignments on this, and how that's helped them to not just do a one-size-fits-all approach with their team, and to flex their style, and to actually notice, you know, actually rocks do become monkeys if we're not careful, and rising stars don't just become stars automatically. There quite often needs to be training or support to facilitate that process, and maybe we need to get a bit more structure around how we're doing that, and we might need to work with HR or HRD to help us to do that. But that this model has helped get us really clear about what our numbers are in each box in that team, and what we need to do to focus on making them where we want them to be. So I think that's good.
What I learned from that session was that it's not just about identifying your, say, monkeys or your naughty, you know, the naughty ones in your group. It's also about identifying your rising stars and making sure that, you know, you're encouraging them as well to turn them into stars.
Yeah, definitely, because there's nothing worse than having all your energy drained by your monkeys and then neglecting your rising stars and your rocks, and then they become monkeys and you just end up with more and more monkeys, so like monkey breeding going on. So yeah, that's not what you want. So it's about making sure you get that balance and understanding why they become monkeys, and asking why is that, why is that, why. So I would say 5 whys, drilling down. And I did this with a team manager recently, and they had somebody who they were going to put on a performance improvement plan. So I was coaching them to think about this person in more detail, and they went away and did a coaching session with that monkey, and then they came back to me the following week and said actually they felt really embarrassed over a part of their job that they felt they should know, but that they didn't really, and they were embarrassed by the fact that they didn't, and so they were just not doing it. And I was prepared to take them down a non-compliant, disciplinary procedure, when actually all we needed to do was have a conversation about it and give them some extra coaching and training to be able to do it, and now it's fine. But they were, because of their attitude about it, it was quite blasé, and I'm not doing that. When we actually dug down, why are they behaving like that? There was this embarrassment factor coming into it. So that was really, really interesting. I think just by having that coaching conversation, that manager saved an attrition with that individual, which would have been between, probably for that business, £6,000 or £7,000 to recruit and replace that person, just for the sake of having a 30-minute, a little bit uncomfortable at first, but 30-minute coaching conversation with some silence, to get that person to open up about what was really going on. And that was just the application of this model that did that, and then the coaching after.
Yeah, Christine's actually said this is very important and ties nicely to succession planning activities. We're working on this assessment now, so that's great.
Yeah, good. Then in week 2, we did quite a lot of work thinking about recruitment, retention, interview questions, and that side of things. So I think, one of the key things from that session, if you weren't already doing it, was to think about your exit interview process and your analysis of that data. So I think Andy did an assignment on that, which was excellent to see. So putting that into place, and we've given you, lots of questions to use, but obviously you can add to that and write your own and tweak and change them to suit your business. But that is such rich pickings of information in order to keep your staff engagement correct and make sure that you're retaining your good people, and that you can continuously improve your recruitment strategy as well. So it all ties in together, and I think it stops us getting caught in that trap of wasting time and money recruiting and replacing people, when actually if we change some things about the environment, or we change some things about the training, or some things about how we do recruitment in the first place, we wouldn't get in this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of catch-22 with turnover.
Yeah. I think a lot of people mentioned that it was down to their kind of recruitment process and things. So I think rather than just leaving it all to the exit interview, it was very much making sure you're recruiting the right people, and you're not selling the job as something that it's not.
Yeah, and that's where, taking people on a tour of the contact centre, really giving them the warts and all. We talked a lot about that in this session. And also thinking about who is doing the initial sift of applications. Are you doing telephone interviews? For me, if I'm recruiting agents for voice channel, I want to do a telephone interview with them before I do a face-to-face interview, because if they don't sound good on the phone, then I don't even want to see them for a face-to-face interview, because it's a waste of my time and theirs. So, who is doing that process? And if it's somebody in HR who doesn't know what to listen for, or doesn't think telephone interviews are necessary, and then they're just lining you up a load of interview appointments and you turn up to do them, the quality is probably not what you're looking for, unless you are working really closely with your HR team and you're kind of in it together. So that's about the relationship that you have with them, and your involvement in the process as well. That's important with that. I think from the third week, one of the things that really kind of stood out for people, and it came through in a few assignments, I know Kelly mentioned that she'd used this with good success, is the Thrive model and the 7 C's, and making this a way in which you can have open conversations with people without it being kind of too personal. So I mean, for me, the whole kind of cared for box is very, very telling, because that could be cared for as in attention from my manager, cared for as in reward and pay, benefits, cared for even as kind of my environment and where I sit and what the contents of the vending machine, or my shift patterns, or all that psychological contract stuff that we've covered at length, I think comes through in that cared for box. And so I find that is really one of the ones that stands out for me in the Thrive model. But also looking at kind of how competent people feel, and this is where it ties in nicely with self-assessment, that we were talking about the importance of giving advisors that opportunity to self-assess, and just kind of having this as a tool to facilitate conversations is something different than just doing call listening all the time. I think it can just give another dimension to it that's more about them as an individual and less about let's play back a call, which is obviously it's valuable, but sometimes it's nice to have something else up your sleeve and in your kit bag. I think quite a few people enjoyed using that as a model, which is good.
We had a question back to the exit interviews, or I think it was to do with recruitment. Christine's asked, this one is tough for me because I work with a third party, and with strict co-employment laws, I'm only allowed to go so far. Most of this is done by the third party, and they'll not share some of the details with us. What would you suggest in that sort of situation?
Yeah, that is a bit tricky. I guess it comes down to kind of the relationship that you have with that third party. I mean, if they're subcontracted as your provider, they should, you would hope, be quite flexible from a customer service perspective to you, to help you gain the best results from the work that they're doing. So it might be that there's an account manager responsible for that partnership, that relationship, that maybe we could bring into that conversation, because it's not about beating them up, but it's about, we need that information. Why would they be protective of it? I'm not sure. We need that information in order to make improvements to the contact centre, to our employment policies and procedures, but also, you know, kind of thinking, are there informal ways in which you can gather that yourself, Christine? Because if we look at the Thrive model again, with that for a second, so one of the C's is comfortable. So is my environment working for me or not, or is one of the reasons I'm leaving the fact that actually I've got a bad back and I can't sit for a shift on the phone all the time in a static position? And actually, if we'd have had that conversation, we could have made different arrangements for you. But if we're not getting that exit interview data, or we're not being told that, and the person just leaves, we're missing that opportunity. So we really need to get our hands on either that data through them or collect it some other way yourself, I think, is my answer.
Fab.
Okay, then last week, well, 2 weeks ago now, we looked at metrics and all these different fun and funky kind of ways in which we can get data out of the contact centre, and then how we use that data to inform our KPIs, our operation, our strategy, our technology choices, our processes and procedures, and make that part of our continuous improvement journey. So we talked quite a lot, and I know we started this session today talking about AHT, one of my favourite topics of conversation. But you know, it's also about, we talked about Net Easy Score and CSAT. That's really key. I think we had an assignment on looking at SLAs and you know, in weekly meetings, having more communication about why we're setting the metrics that we're setting, and do the advisors think that those are fair? I think that was Holly's assignment, and that was really powerful, because we talked about, you know, in a previous session, one of the keys to sort of having a happy team was communication, and it very much sounds like Holly's taken that along with this piece and put the two together, and had, you know, this new weekly support meeting that she set up. And the first week they talked about, is the SLA on speed to answer appropriate? Do you feel that that's effective? Are we setting you up to win kind of against that SLA? And to just open up that dialogue in that weekly meeting, I think was fantastic. Because even though things might not necessarily change or be different, just having that opportunity to air why I find that challenging, and to maybe get some other suggestions or resources, or to be in a room of people where actually 80% of them don't find it challenging, it makes me start to think differently. And that's in itself, I think, a real win. So it's, again, how you use your metrics, but you're using them in context in your operation. And I think Jamie wrote an assignment about how he's kind of pulling together some of these metrics as well, which is really interesting to see. So that whole kind of looking at first contact resolution in conjunction with AHT, I think was really key, so that we're not just using AHT on its own, because that can go a bit wrong, but looking at it in conjunction with first contact resolution. Because if my AHT is really high, but my first contact resolution is also good, that's a lot better, isn't it, than my AHT being high and my first contact resolution being low? Because then we are just chatting about the weather or something else, or I'm putting you on hold for long periods, or we're doing something that's not relevant. So when we start to combine some of these metrics together, then we can get some fantastic results. So it was really good to see that in an assignment being brought to life in practice. So yeah, all the fun and games of call centre KPIs and metrics that we'd love to bore people to death with, who are not, jargon, WFM, and all of that. So we've covered a lot in this programme, I feel, in the time that we've had, and I've got here an action plan for you to think about, and it would be great if you can start to think about this while we're in this session, because it will give you the next steps for your personal development going forward. So you can do this on your own, writing in the booklet if you've downloaded the booklet, or you can by all means put this into the chat room, because I would love to see it, and for us to share that as peers, I think is really powerful. So in terms of your action plan, can you think now going forward, what is one thing, your top priority hot potato, that you would like to get rid of or solve? And hopefully that's not just like an individual advisor that you would like to get rid of. Don't just put their name in the chat room or anything. But what is one thing that you would like to solve, whether it is a difficult person issue, or whether it's something technology-wise that's bugging you or bugging your team, how would you like to solve a particular challenge that's still kind of keeping you awake at night? And then what's one thing that you need to keep doing? So whether that's something that you've implemented from this program, or whether you've just become aware, actually I do this really quite well and I didn't realise it was best practice, but now I know it is, and it's really important that I don't ever let that slip, then it would be really good to hear about that as well. Because when we're thinking about, what we'd like to change and get rid of or solve, sometimes we can then lose our focus on the good stuff that's all in place and is ticking along quite nicely, and that then starts, and then it's like juggling, so you get one ball up in the air and you drop another one. So it's quite good to make sure that we continue to keep doing the good things while we're on continuous improvement. This next question is about, what would your team perform even better if they did? So that might be, my team would perform better if we had an omni-channel strategy with a completely tied in CRM to social media and live chat. And so then that's a technology business case that it's going to lead you to. Or it might be, my team would perform better if we had more time off the phones for coaching. Whatever it might be, what do you think your team would perform even better if? And if you can't answer that question, then again, this is useful in itself, because we need to be asking them, what are the biggest blockers to you in your day-to-day job? And I know when I go and work with clients and I get focus groups of advisors together and I ask them these types of questions, I get so much stuff which, once senior management are aware of, they go, oh, that's really easy to fix. Why did nobody say that? And it's because the advisors at the front line often think, well, management must know this. They've put this system in for a reason, or they've put this process in for a reason. But actually, those senior managers are too far removed, and we talked about ivory tower syndrome in the past. They're too far removed to understand what the impact of that is necessarily day to day. And then they might see spikes in metrics or drops in KPIs and not really connect the things together. But when you ask the advisor, it's pretty obvious. So have that conversation if you don't know what the answer is to that question, and think about then, how do I move that forward? So it's for me as a manager to start building a business case to ask for a change. And then the last one is about you personally. So if you were to perform even better, what would that be? And you can't just say, I would perform even better if I had twice as many hours in my working week, because we'd all love that to some extent, to get more stuff, less pressure, but that's not going to happen. So I would perform even better if maybe I was stricter on my time management. I would perform even better if I said no to certain things at certain times. I would perform even better if I had more self-awareness about when to stop talking. Whatever it might be, what would you perform even better if you did? So it's just really to give you some questions to stimulate some of your thinking around your next steps in development. And if you're willing to share one or more of those in the chat room, then that is brilliant. Or it might be something that you want to do kind of as an almost ongoing assignment now. So for the next week, if we were meeting again, you would have produced a page or two of A4 on the answers to these.
Well, I'd perform better if my sign kept trying not to kill me.
Has it done it again?
It has, yes. Oh, sorry, it made me jump. I wonder what it was. Sorry.
There we go. So what would we need to do to resolve that, do you think? I think it needs to nail it into the wall.
Make it solidly stuck to the wall.
Oh dear. So what one thing would you like to get rid of, Rachel?
The sign.
Yeah. And sometimes, the answer to that would be, I'd like to get rid of the customers, because life would be, get rid of the users and the customers, because life would be a lot easier if we didn't have those customers, or certain customers who are very kind of high intensity to kind of serve. But, we can't always do that, so we sometimes have to bring that question back to what's within your circle of control and your circle of influence to actually do something about, because I would perform even better if I had the 7 numbers for the lottery, or is it more than that now, that you need in order to win, but that's not within my circle of control or influence, so we have to keep our answers to these questions quite pragmatic as well, to kind of drill it down.
Do you think it would be worth, almost having this action plan that you maybe do it once a month and
Definitely.
revisit these questions and say, what one thing would I like to get rid of or solve this month, as it were? Maybe part of your, hours training with yourself.
Oh, definitely, absolutely. I mean, there's a number of questions that I use to self-coach quite a lot, and so I will use a set of questions to kind of help me keep things in context, because when the more emotionally involved you are in something, so you put effort into it, you put time into it, maybe it's your baby, your idea, the more emotionally invested you are in something, the less rational you are when things go wrong. And if you've got somebody outside of yourself to give you some context and to ask you some coaching questions, then that can be really helpful to get that perspective. But if you don't have that luxury in that moment and you're finding that you're getting yourself wound up or anxious or annoyed or frustrated, then it's about being able to press pause and step back off autopilot and think, right, detach logically, let's put this in perspective. So one of my favourite questions for that is, where is this issue on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 equals death? So that kind of can just help to get a bit more context. Work is work, and as long as we're not talking life and death, then we can deal with it. Now, some of my clients are, ambulance services and police contact centres, and we are talking about life and death. And so those things happen that are 7, 8, 9s, and 10s on that scale. But I think the real tragedy is when stuff is 1s, 2s, and 3s, but we're reacting and feeling like it's a 7, 8, 9, or 10. And that's when we start to get into a state of, not thinking clearly, being over emotional at work. And so we're talking here about, personal resilience and professionalism and how you contextualize stuff. But we're human beings, and when you get into that spiral, it can be quite difficult to press stop and to detach and pull yourself out of it. So having some questions to self-coach, I think, can be really helpful. So where is this issue on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 equals death? I broke my arm a few years ago really badly, and I had it in a plaster cast from my wrist to my shoulder. And so I couldn't bend my elbow, it was completely stabilised, and then it was like that for 6 weeks, and I couldn't dress myself and I couldn't drive my car. I've got 2 small children that I needed to look after, and it was really, really difficult time for me. And if somebody had come to me and said, Carolyn, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 equals death, where is it? I would have whacked them with my arm, I think, at that point. So I think there is another question that you have to put with that sometimes, which is, how important will this be in 6 months' time? So when we think about how important that will be in 6 months' time, with the plaster cast, it came off after 6 weeks and it was done. So when I asked myself the second question, it's like, where is this issue on a scale of 1 to 10? It's actually a 7 or an 8 for me. But how important will this be in 6 months' time? Well, actually, it won't matter. In 6 months' time, it'll be gone. In fact, 8 weeks later, when the plaster cast was off and I saw people I hadn't seen for a few weeks, they were like, oh, how's your arm? And I was kind of like a bit stumped for a minute while I was like, what? Oh, yeah. Because I'd forgotten it was done, it had gone, it was fixed, it had gone, and it was out of my brain. So I think, when you're in it at that point, sometimes it can get a bit out of proportion, and that becomes one of your barriers to your own sanity, your professionalism, your logic, and that's not good for you. So the third question that I would always put with those is my response appropriate and effective? So if you're writing an email feeling really angry, then chances are your response isn't being appropriate or effective, because that emotion is coming through. So it's like trying to smash your alarm clock with a sledgehammer in the morning because you're just so rattled and riled, and it's not what you want, but that's not an effective kind of adult response. So it's again kind of having a bit of time to step back and to calm down. And that's not saying you should deal like that with everything, and your advisor comes and says to you, I've got an issue, and you say, well, did anybody die? And your advisor says, well, no, and you go, right, well, fine, I'm off for a cappuccino, I'll see you later. It's not necessarily that, but it's about keeping it into context. So that's, I think, really key. So once you've got those 3 questions to help you do that, other questions that you can kind of coach yourself with around how you move on from that situation are really important. So just taking what you've learned from it, what you can find that's positive in it, what you might do differently next time, and what resources have you already got. Because I think sometimes we're so focused on, in a contact centre environment, I haven't got budget for speech analytics, I haven't got the fanciest CRM system, I haven't got this and I haven't got that. But what have you got? What can you do with what you've got where you are? Or who else might you be able to tap into internally? You've got an IT team, or other people that we might be able to join up with. We can do quite a lot more than we realise, I think, sometimes. So I think those would be other questions that I might add into kind of a monthly self-check on highs and lows of my performance going forward as well.
I mean, you could also, I suppose, ask your team, the rest of your agents those questions as well.
Oh, yeah.
I would perform better if, and you could find out more about them. How what one thing would I like to get rid of or solve?
Yeah.
Some of those questions might actually help you understand them more, maybe during your one-to-ones.
Yeah, the more probing questions that you can ask in a coaching session, the better it will be. So I run 3-day programs on coaching where we go through rafts and rafts of questions that you could possibly use, but it often comes back to just kind of the real simple why. Well, why is that, and why do you think that, and why do you think that is, and drilling down with a tool just like 5 whys is really, really powerful. Just to open up and facilitate that thinking. And in order to do that, you've got to be comfortable with silence yourself as the coach. And you might think that feels awful and it's wasting time, but that's really powerful thinking time. So you might say to your advisors, in our sessions, that there may be times when neither of us is speaking, and that's fine. We just have some reflection time while we think about where we want to go with it next. So take that pressure away. Silence is one of the best ways in which to get people to do thinking that they just don't have time to do day to day, and to come up with some ideas and solutions and to even just kind of have a light bulb moment themselves to go, oh, that's why I feel embarrassed about that. And that's why I'm not doing it, because I'm not entirely clear when you change something what that really means in practice. So I think that's really key. So if there's no further questions or comments on that in the chat room, you know, I have set aside some time for Q&A, but I will stick around after we finish at 2 o'clock if there's anything else anyone wants to ask about anything that we've covered at all in the programme. And like I say, I am available on my email address for anything you want to ask me after this programme finishes for perpetuity. You know, that's absolutely fine. So I've just put together just some of the top trends that I can see coming down the pipeline for 2016. This word omni-channel, which is a bit of a buzzword, which basically means multi-channel but with finesse. So you've got your email, your voice, live chat, social media, in terms of whatever quantities you're dealing with, the volumes across those. But how do they come together to create one view, single view of the customer journey? And so that's massively dependent upon technology and the systems that you've got available for that, and that your advisors can tap into being able to see that. And increasingly customers are expecting an omni-channel experience. I want, you know, to use my smartphone, and I want to use it on the move, and it might be easier at one time for me to call you, and it might be easier at another time for me to tweet at you, and it might be easier at the other time for me to use your app or whatever. But I need all of that to come together and not have to kind of explain myself again each time in a silo. So that's really important. I see more and more use of this term customer hub. So, you know, when we're talking about a call or a contact centre, we're actually talking about a customer hub where we're gathering all this insight and data about the customer in one place, and being able to, like we talked about before, feed out information to the other parts of the business about what we need to do in order to retain our customers and increase customer satisfaction. So we are kind of the big data place for everything to do with customer. This is one of great debate at the moment, kind of intelligent assistants, and will the contact centre be replaced by robots by 2020? You know, so there's a lot of stuff for and against those arguments. But I do think, you know, we are seeing some good use in some organisations of intelligent assistance, and I think there is certainly some fairly simple transactional stuff that can be handled by intelligent assistants. But maybe when we're looking at kind of the more complicated or emotional issues, then absolutely it's good to speak to a human. Self-service, that's been around for a while, but it's also about how you tie that in to your omni-channel stuff, and if you're going to go down the route of using intelligence assistants, how that also helps them in that way, because you will have links, portals, communities, FAQs and other things that you can direct and signpost people to. We know that actually the appetite for self-service is really high, so it's not just about using self-service to our own internal benefit because it's cheaper and saves us having to put in effort and resource. Customers actually like self-service because, you know, funnily enough, they don't necessarily want to ring your call centre, and so increasingly when we're talking about smartphone users, Generation Y and millennials, they will want to do either text-based FAQs or avoid voice until they absolutely have to. So making sure you've got a good self-service portal is really key, and along with that goes video as well. So either video of how-tos is really key, but also video support. So we're seeing obviously now that the younger generation are using YouTube as a search engine more than they're using Google, and getting kind of more familiar with video as a way of learning and getting information. So it would make perfect sense then not to ring and speak to an advisor over the phone, but to connect with them online and chat to them through video. So we're already seeing brands that are doing that, and that also links to the power of the front line for me, because do they look like, you know, kind of the type of person you would want to have on video is key. But also when we're looking at digital strategy and people putting stuff in communities and social media, then your front line has the ability to make or break your brand in the way in which they treat your customers. So I think this is actually quite a cool trend that I'm really behind, because I think we have to value our front line. I think we have to skill them better, pay them better, respect them more, and treat them and elevate them more in the business than we ever have before. And I think that's only a good thing. So that the contact centre isn't seen as kind of the poor relation and the front line is the bottom of the heap, that actually those are the people who are shaping the perspective of your brand, who have the ability to retain your customers or not. And I think that has a direct impact on the bottom line. And certainly Net Promoter Score has been a tool that I think has brought that to the fore even more, which is good. And so that linked with that is the strategic role of customer services, so that it again is round that board table. It's seen as important and as a piece in the jigsaw that adds value in the data and the insights that it can provide, not just being a negative cost to serve customers that we would rather not have. We've got the holistic view of quality, which I know we've touched on in this session. You know, kind of in the past we've talked about moving away from tick boxes, scripting and percentages, and having a more holistic kind of view of what quality means, and getting real-time feedback for your advisors through cloud-based scorecarding software, so that it isn't something that you're doing on an Excel spreadsheet a month later and going, do you remember that call you had at the beginning of the month? That we're actually looking at it kind of more holistically. So what was the overall impression that that customer left with, not did you say this and did you say that, and doing it like that. And I think that's really great for personalisation, because we're not making all our advisors speak to all our customers all in the same way, and saying you have to say this phrase here and you have to say this phrase there. And naturally, for certain kind of businesses, particularly financial services, there may be some stuff that they have to do, but it's still in between those bits, personalised, both with the advisor personality, but more importantly with that individual customer. You know, is that customer a reflective type? Are they a talkative type? And is the advisor able to sense and respond to that? And are we rewarding them for that? So they're actually tuning into that customer and flexing. We've talked a little bit about insight, gathering data, but also the voice of the customer strategy and how that feeds in. So it just links with what we've been talking about there in terms of personalisation. And when you're looking at all this different data that's available to you, so you know, you're looking at CSAT, you're looking at Net Easy Score, you're looking at Net Promoter Score, all of that insight and data should then be feeding into a strategy which says we need to get better here, the customer doesn't like that, the customer says they love this, and that becomes then the strategy for customer services and what we need to work on. And the final one, you know, we're seeing a lot of take up and customers really enjoying visual IVR. So I think that's a real positive thing. So they're getting the app in their smartphone, and they are quite happy to press on the screen and choose different options, as opposed to press 1 for this and press 2 for that and listen to a very long-winded audio. So I think actually using visual IVR is becoming really powerful, and it's much more acceptable, and customers are certainly saying they like that way more than the old-fashioned audio. So those are some of the things that I wanted to leave you with going forward. Some further things to think about. I'm sure there'll be webinars, Rachel, on all of these topics coming up.
I'm sure so. Yeah, we are trying to cover more kind of customer and employee engagement, empowering and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, just keep an eye out on the website.
Excellent. Okay, so how are we doing for time?
We've got about 3 minutes left.
Excellent. Okay. Well, if there are any further questions or comments, from the chat room, it's a good time for me to take those as well.
Yeah.
Any final words before I say goodbye?
No, I mean, from us, I know that you've said that there were some great insights from the assignments, and so it would just be whether everyone would be willing for us to use them. Obviously removing company names and things like that, just because they've been really interesting for us to learn about how you've been using all the details that we've learned.
Yeah.
Lots of people saying, loved these meetings, thanks so much. I agree, thank you so much. So Kelly, we're going to be doing a survey afterwards as well, just so that, you can share with us the good and the bad. We just want your feedback on everything, so we'll be sending that out after this session, probably this afternoon. And for everyone who's filled in an assignment, there's a certificate that I'll be sending over. Carolyn, I don't know whether, if people were sending over their assignments later on today or perhaps tomorrow, they'd still be getting a certificate.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's fine. I'm quite happy to leave that open this week if you've not already done it. I'll just keep reading them and reviewing them till the end of this week. That's fine.
Yeah. So obviously, you might have a question in the upcoming weeks or anything. So there's several ways that you can get in touch. Obviously, you've got my email address, you've got Carolyn's email address if you wanted to contact her directly, or we've got a forum on the front page of our website. Well, it's on every page, and obviously our LinkedIn group has got some great resources, some really interesting people giving feedback. So keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely. If you can fill out the survey when it comes through, it will help us massively because it's the first series like this that we've done. So it's been great to have you all on board and have your participation in it. I've really enjoyed working with you all and seeing your comments in the chat room each week and reading your assignments. It's fantastic to know that you're making a difference out there with people who've got call centre jobs. That for me is why I enjoy my job, helping you guys to get the most out of your job, which delivers through to the front line. So I love that. Thank you.
Fab. So I think we'll be sticking around in the chat room if anybody has any questions. But from the actual live broadcast, I think that's it from us both. Thank you very much, Carolyn, for all your insights and everything. I've really enjoyed. I know I've learned a lot.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Okay,
Thanks
thank
for
you,
having me.
everyone.
Bye.
Okay, bye, everyone.